postmodernist annihilates Marx. In Specters of Marx, the post-structuralist social theorist Jacques Derrida writes about the famous slash infamous economist and political theorist Marx, the evil Marx, his opinion his opinions on alienation and historical materialism. Derrida points out that alienation and history is the process of material practice leaves the question to which these respond undetermined. He seems to agree with Marx that you can at least see what appears to be alienation in modern capitalist society, and that you can view history through the lens of people's ability to financially support themselves and buy new shiny objects. However, what are alienation and historical materialism responses to? What causes them? Marx might answer capitalism. Historical materialism is not necessarily a problem because it's just a way of viewing history. We don't need to get into the philosophical complexities of that here. It has to it has something to do with Hegel, but it's not that exactly, and it's not the way it sounds, but I don't need to get into it here. Anyway, um, it is nonetheless, though, historical materialism for the purposes of this. It's a way of viewing history. Anyway, alienation is obviously bad, though. Does capitalism cause alienation? Marx might say that it just makes the people experiencing the conditions of culture under capitalism a lot more likely to feel alienated. Also, that some consequences of capitalism incentivize us to look at history differently in order to prevent further repeated consequences of history. But what if today's or yesterday's readers differently formulate the question to the answer of alienation and historical materialism? What if to them there should be no question at all? Are they just assuming that alienation due to the consequences of capitalism are inevitable? That's pretty fucking doom or black pilled. It's also a contradiction. If alienation is inevitable, what's the point of even pointing it out or trying to improve capitalism to make it less volatile? How do you even know that capitalism is the problem then if you won't bother to figure out what the problem is? This assumption that alienation is inevitable is what I often target because it's what the famous Enlightenment philosopher Kant called a synthetic a priori claim. This means that it's just taken for granted, assumed to be inherently true, and it doesn't need to be proved or explained. A synthetic a priori claim is a fucking dumb argument. We don't even know what Marx identifies as alienation is actually alienation. It could just be something that looks like it. Marx's alienation due to capitalism is a contradiction because it's seen as part of the consequences of capitalism, yet we apparently don't actually need to know the cause of the alienation. If you make the synthetic a priori claim that alienation is essentially inevitable under capitalism, but you don't need to know how capitalism led to alienation, how do you know that capitalism is even the problem? Since Marx's explanation of alienation due to capitalism is so contradictory, that's probably why his thoughts on this subject have been interpreted in various different ways and contradictory ways. People have seen this as humanism, historicism, atheism, anti humanism, or even nihilism. No wonder people vastly disagree about Marx's sometimes fucking convoluted logic. That being said, a lot of people like fucking Jordan Peterson endlessly strawman him. Same with James Lindsay, who I often criticize too, because all or Jordan Peterson especially is only read the Communist Manifesto, and James Lindsay cherry picks like a motherfucker, and he's crazy, and they don't fucking have a clue about what Marx is actually talking about. But nonetheless, Derrida's fucking harsh criticism of Marx is right. And remember, this is important because Jordan Peterson says that postmodernists are Marxists, and postmodern neo-Marxists want to put us all in a gulag. Even though, like I've said 1,000 times, and plenty of other people have too, people who know more about philosophy than me have said countless times and pointed out countless times, and you can see in Derrida and Foucault's writings their clear criticisms of some aspects of Marx, this vicious criticism in particular. Anyway, so he's talking about Marx's sometimes fucking convoluted logic in terms of historical materialism and alienation and under capitalism specifically. So anyway, Derrida pointed out some interesting contradictions in Marx's logic on historical materialism and alienation due to capitalism. Derrida grants that you can see alienation in modern capitalist society and that you can view history through the lens of historical materialism. However, alienation is seen, or at least can easily be interpreted, as doomer black-pilled contradictory logic. Alienation is assumed to be inevitable, and you don't need to find out how it's caused. But if capitalism leads to alienation, yet you don't need to explain how or why, there's no guarantee that capitalism is the real problem. Alienation could possibly be caused by something that has nothing whatsoever to do with capitalism. In reality, it's probably much more complex than that. People likely feel alienated due to a number of different reasons. Capitalism can be one of those reasons. It can be a bigger one for some, maybe, and way less of a reason for others. For example, maybe a poor person is much more likely to feel alienated by capitalism than a filthy rich person is. Also, let's not forget that alienation being inevitable is a synthetic a priori claim. Therefore, even if we agree that capitalism causes alienation, the alienation's existence has not been proven. So, not only does Marx fail to prove that capitalism causes alienation, he fails to prove that the alienation even happens. He uses contradictory logic to argue that capitalism causes alienation, and a synthetic a priori claim to argue that alienation happens under capitalism. Marx's dumb logic fails to prove that capitalism alienates people. Derrida wins. Postmodernist annihilates Marx.